Hey everybody. Welcome, welcome. All right, our next chapter, we've got the Great American Show Shop. We're going to talk a little bit about comedy, but also about some comedy that isn't funny. We'll talk about The Music Man, we'll talk about Guys and Dolls, and then we'll talk about the Julie Stein and Stephen Sondheim collaboration musical. Um, so let's get on board. Um, so, um, we've talked about works like Carousel, we've talked about West Side Story, serious musicals, but I mean, if you've heard songs like G Officer Krupke from West Side Story, they're not without comedy. I mean, there are silly things in most shows, and comedy didn't really leave. But some of the more comic musicals have, though they have amusing moments, um, often haven't aged in a way that is especially amusing. There are exceptions, of course, though. But one example is something like The Pajama Game, which is a romantic comedy musical, and it was made as a film as well. You can watch it. But I mean, it's also about a boss and a union representative, and especially in these 2022 years, and the way people talk about labor today, um, you know, unions aren't always funny. It's sometimes a very serious issue, and sometimes the concerns are very real. So, a comedic approach certainly made sense during that time. Um, but I mean, there are some very real dangers to people who work as labor organizers today. So it might not age well if we tried to put it on today. Um, Similarly, and I mean, again, many of these are quite funny, but have serious undertones to them as well, which is why I think they're very interesting to discuss. The Music Man, we've got, a comedy about it, in early 20th century. Remember, we talked about that as a sweet spot of a time period for a lot of these musicals. A con man who falls in love with a librarian in one of the small towns where he visits. He's trying to convince them to invest, quote unquote, money in supplies for a children's marching band. So basically, get a lot of money, to sell stuff to these kids and then leave town and find the next town. And what it has a, famous and fun patter song called Trouble, which you might have heard before. I've included a link there in case you haven't. And if you've watched The Simpsons, there is some famous influence of this moment and this song, where a stranger rolls up into town and convinces everyone to invest in a monorail. And it's a comic approach, but at the same time, the way people can easily come up with moral panic, and convince people to invest money in ways that, supposedly fend off moral panic, and the kind of slick rhetoric that people fall for. I mean, that's present even today. And, people often, today will buy something that makes us feel safer. It's kind of like when people were talking about the solution to school shootings to have fewer doors in the school. Well, that's that might be good for, security manufacturers, but that's not necessarily going to solve the problem at hand. Um, Similarly, we've got, and this is, I think, has aged a bit more comically. And as soon as I said that, I realized part of it that hadn't. So hang on. Guys and Dolls, Frank Lesser. There's comic intersecting narratives. Again, sort of early 20th century New York, maybe a more sort of gritty side here. The music is sharp, the lyrics are funny. Lots of kind of highs and lows. You've got gamblers, intersecting with missionaries, and another gambler as a showgirl is a girlfriend, and he keeps almost losing her. Um, So, on the one hand, it's like a musical composed mostly of quirky character actors. On the other hand, the way the gambler, who in the film was played by Marlon Brando, if you've ever wanted to hear Marlon Brando sing, you get to hear him in Guys and Dolls. Um, he takes this lovely missionary to Cuba and, plies her with cocktails, which we don't necessarily love as a plot device today, although it ends up being kind of a cute and happy ending. A couple of well-known and amusing um, parts. There's the very opening of the show has what's called a fugue for tin horns, which is got a bunch of gamblers singing about horse races and gambling, kind of trying to get you right into their world of these Damon Runyon written characters. Then you've also got, and this is in the film, and so part of why I'm including it is that Frank Sinatra and Vivian Blaine plays his girlfriend, Adelaide, and he plays Nathan Detroit, which is an excellent gambler name. Singing a duet together. And she's a really fun comic actress, and his sort of smooth crooner style of singing plays well against the way she performs. So give those a try when you get a chance. One thing I mentioned at the very beginning of class, which is, why we're talking about this particular musical by Julie Stein and Stephen Sondheim that has what we now know as a slur for the title, is that it's incredibly relevant. There's nothing like it. And it's important to kind of understanding the overall arching themes we talk about in this class related to musical theater. And there's some just fascinating stuff in there. Please watch it if you get the chance and, get through the whole thing if you can. For one, it's kind of about the traffic in women and children. Where women, children first are evaluated according to their value as commodities and what can be gotten for them. Mama Rose takes great pride in, the audiences her children can command as child actors and performers. But also linking this back to literary history. It sounds creepy and disturbing now, but if you've ever read something like Pride and Prejudice, if you've been in one of my classes where we read Clarissa by Samuel Richardson, it was kind of parents' jobs to place their kids in financially comfortable situations, and in a time when you can't just raise your daughters to an age where they're adults and marry them to a rich guy, people like Mama Rose have to rethink that. So I wrote here, parents are pimps, a long tradition. But I mean, it's Mrs. Bennet's job in Pride and Prejudice to marry her daughters off so that they'll be provided for. And Mama Rose takes it as her job to make baby June a star and also keep Louise along for the ride. So that's, an interesting conflict that I don't know fully whether it's been explored. Money and corruption, obviously. I mean, one of the things that happens to Mama Rose along the way is that she starts becoming ambitious for her children even after she has found a relationship with a man who, she seems to enjoy being with, who could provide for her if she wanted. That chase, the chasing of glory ends up becoming a downfall for her because it's glory through her children's performance, not through her achievements. It also, I mean, it touches on ideas about age and aging that are really relevant in the entertainment industry. It's not how old you are, it's, how old can you get a job, performing as? Can you still play high school? If so, then you're in high school. Louise wonders how old she is. She doesn't know because it's never been in her best interest. There's a scene where Louise and June are sitting in front of the agent's secretary, and they tell her she's, they're both 9 years old going on 10, and the secretary just laughs. How long have you been saying that? Because they're both clearly, post puberty. Um, but at the same time, how are we complicit as audience members? Um, you know, if you've ever watched a movie that had cute kids doing cute stuff in it, do we know that that entertainment did not exploit those children? And we don't know that. Um, that's a dark way to think about it, but it's not inaccurate either. Things are better now. Children have more rights and more protections. Child labor is better protected. Is the objectification consistent though? Are 15-year-olds trying to play 12-year-olds? I'm not sure what the ages are of the characters in Stranger Things, but I think they are trying to play, you know, being in a very short period of time for a show that's been on for 4 or 5 years. Um, so what are the options for girls in this industry? And this is the entertainment industry then, before then in the, early 20th century where this is set, and, to some extent later on. And so the options for girls, you fetishized innocence, where Dainty June keeps her little hee 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 kind of accent, as long as she can, even after her voice has deepened somewhat with puberty. Um, but what are the options for women when they grow up? Well, there's sexualization, there's objectification, and in the case of adult Louise, it's sex work in a way. It's burlesque, and she finds a way to kind of game it to make it a performance of sex work in a way. But at the same time, I mean, her mother pushes her onto the stage to be objectified by men in an audience. And the first time she realizes she's pretty is right before she has to go on stage and do this. And it's heartbreaking in its own way. She develops a persona that ends up being really popular and, in control. But, how is that control when you've sort of been pushed through this self-objectification your whole life? And, is it sometimes that way for women as adults? If you think of some like Instagram influencers, you might kind of see some of this in there. Um, is becoming a mother opting out of this kind of objectification? To some extent, yes, you're in the domestic sphere, you're not in the public sphere necessarily, but Mama Rose is gaming the system by managing her daughters when she isn't able to perform like this. Um, I mean, one of the wilder things in this show is that we have May We Entertain You from Dainty June or Baby June, what she's called different things, versus Let Me Entertain You, literally the same song to watch a little girl dance or a striptease. I mean, it's about as, on the nose as you can get with that. The Moo Cow song where the little girl's cow would move with her to the city because she loves her human more than the boy cow. So, yeah, troubling the boundaries of separating the entertainment industry from trafficking, sex work, and exploitation of children. And then, of course, Mama Rose herself, and this is something to think about, has this sort of descent into psychological collapse, or it's also called a musical comedy with a mad scene. How is this her story, and what is her character arc? And finally, to explain the title and think about how you might retitle it. Today it's known to be a slur, but was not widely understood as such when adult Louise took the stage name or when Stein, Arthur Lawrence, and Sondheim wrote the show. And it also circles back to some older shows where women would seem more exotic and mysterious. Thank you.